The darkest hour in American history is slavery, a crime against humanity that lasted far too long. Slavery was a harsh and terrible way of life for the African American race. Within the slave community, there had been a difference within class among slaves. House slaves had been the superior form of slavery, being higher class than field hands, viewed so not only by the slaves themselves, but slave owners too. Field slaves had been utilized strictly for production, while house slaves were more like servants. Their duties were more preferred considering they hadn't been manual labor. Field slaves' duties included raising plants, fertilization and cultivation of crops, clearing land, mending fences and houses. House slaves' duties had been less demanding. They were expected to care for the house, yard, and gardens, cook, and raise the children. House slaves had the advantage of exposure. They were able to build closer relationships with their masters, humanizing them, making it less likely to be treated in inhumane ways, like a field slave who was whipped and beaten for the slightest of things. Field slaves had been condemned to wooden huts they built themselves that had no insulation or heat. With overcrowded conditions, bedding had been scarce and clothing had been rationed. House slaves had had the privilege of living within the master's houses, secluded to their own bedroom, providing them with privacy, protection, and heating. House slaves had the advantage of wearing their owners' hand-me-downs, displaying their superiority to other owners and slaves. Frederick Douglass had been born a house slave. He had formed a relationship with his master's wife, who had begun teaching him to read and write. After being caught by his master, he was sent down south to be broken by field slavery. A quote from Frederick Douglass's slave narrative: "I was now, for the first time in my life, a field hand. In my new employment, I found myself even more awkward than a country boy appeared to be in a large city. I had been at my new home but 1 week before Mr. Covey gave me a severe whipping." Frederick Douglass's slave narrative reveals how traumatic the transfer over from house slavery to field slavery had truly been, and how the white community had been aware of this. His master had planned to send him into field slavery as punishment. Now here's a clip from the famous movie Django, along with an interview with Samuel L. Jackson.
Bad side. You need to be on his blind side.
You said you ain't know him.
Huh?
I said, you said you ain't know him.
I don't.
Yes, you do.
Mrs. Stevens, I don't.
Why is you lying to me? Then why is you crying?
You scaring me.
Why is I'm scaring you?
Because you scaring me. Just speak.
I mean, you play it, like you said, you play a despised character.
Yeah.
Known in our community as a house nigga.
Yeah, Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom.
Whatever.
You know.
Yeah.
What did you? I know it was all on the script because I seen the page, but I mean, what did you have to do to bring that character out as opposed to?
Nothing. Figure out who he was. Figure out how that worked in that house. You know, and it's like Steven's been there. Steven's never been in the fields. He done. You know, I mean, there used to be, since you read the script, you know, there are lines in there that say, you know, he's seen all manner of shit done to people, and none of it's ever been done to him.
Right.
You know, and he raised Calvin. Calvin's a reflection of Stephen more than anything else. So he's essentially the power behind the throne. He's the Dick Cheney of Candyland. You know,
Yeah.
He really runs shit.
Right.
And
right.
it's real simple to accept that, and to accept the fact that slavery is cool, and you know there's a certain way this works. And inside this 75 miles of Candyland, he's a king. You know? So why would he want anything to change?
America's cinema.
The clip from Django displays the hierarchy of a house slave, Stephen, to a field slave, Broomhilda. Broomhilda is new to house slavery, and she fears Stephen because she's aware of his close relationship with their master, Calvin. The interview with Samuel L. Jackson refers to the character Stephen as the king. He had created Calvin in his own image. Stephen essentially raised him, and although he was his property, Stephen could manipulate Calvin into doing what he wanted. Portraying a house slave's insertion of power had given them control over their own race. When Calvin dies, Stephen is heartbroken, not because he has just lost a friend, but because Calvin had been the one who gave Stephen strength. His life's work had been forming Calvin's ideals to favor him and neglect other slaves' needs, displaying another benefit of being a house slave. raising the children who will later inherit them to share their principles. This is a letter written by John Cropper, the president from the Anti-Slavery Committee, to the people of the United States of Northern America, in which he refers to slavery as a system at once unnatural, unrighteous, and unchristian, a system which embarrasses our legislative assemblies. The Anti-Slavery Committee, along with many other Americans of the time period, had seen the horrors of slavery and understood them to be morally wrong. Whether a house slave or a field slave, one was condemned to a life of servitude and considered a property of another. However, house slavery had been considered the lesser of two evils.